Okay, so today I'm going to go over how to enable Microsoft Entra Kerberos authentication for hybrid identities on the Azure file shares. There are a few prerequisites in order to enable this. The first being that our identities, our user accounts, need to be synchronized from our on-premises ADDS into Entra ID. They cannot be on-premises only or cloud only accounts. Another prerequisite to this is that the devices themselves need to either be hybrid joined or Entra joined. They cannot simply be computer accounts within ADDS. In order to access your Azure file shares, your client devices need to be running Windows 11 Enterprise or Pro or Windows 10 Enterprise or Pro. Windows 10 must be on version 20.04 or later, with the cumulative update preview from November 2021 installed, so that shouldn't be a problem for most deployments. Another point to add is that your ISP must not block outbound SMB connectivity. This is probably the point where you realize this deployment option isn't as good as you thought it might be. In the future, hopefully Microsoft enable accessing these file shares using SMB over QUIC. We can test to see whether our client's internet connection allows outbound SMB connectivity by running the PowerShell command test net connection. On my management VM, I've opened up PowerShell and I will run that commandlet. We'll specify the storage account endpoint for the computer name parameter. And I will use the SMB option for the common TCP port parameter. Fortunately for me, my ISP does not block outbound port 445. Okay, so I've already created my storage account and file share. In the file share, we need to configure the identity-based access option. We then choose to configure Microsoft Entra Kerberos and tick the checkbox. If we want to be able to configure NTF permissions using File Explorer rather than using the iCackles command line option, we need to fill in these two options. The first being our domain name and the second being the GUID for our domain. To retrieve our domain GUID, we access one of our domain join machines as the Active Directory PowerShell module installed. We run the get ad domain commandlet and look for the value of the object GUID property. Copy and paste that in. I will then need to choose a default share level permission option. For ease, I will choose to grant all of my authenticated users the elevated contributor permission. In a production deployment, you may choose the contributor role and then add specific users into the elevated contributor role. NTFS permissions also apply. We now need to grant admin consent to the newly created service principal. We can do this by going to Entra Admin Center by visiting entra.microsoft.com. Under Applications, we choose the App Registrations option, then All Applications. In here, we see an application that has been created with the name of our storage account. We then choose API permissions and grant admin consent. So that is all the configuration required in Azure and Entra. We now need to configure our Windows machines to retrieve the Entra Cloud Kerberos ticket upon logon so they can seamlessly access the Azure file shares. This can be done in several ways, and in production environments, you are likely to configure this with either Intune or a group policy object. You can also just manually add a registry key on specific clients. For this demo, I will edit my local group policy options and then restart my machine. So I set allow retrieving the Cloud Kerberos ticket during logon to enabled. I will now restart my machine. Now that I've restarted, I sign in with my synchronized user account and I will try to access the UNC path of my Azure file share. As you can see, I can directly access the Azure file share. As we have the elevated contributor role, we have the permission to modify, delete, and amend NTFS permissions. Ideally, you'd be using Azure Files as a way to deprecate your on-premises file servers by using the Azure File Sync agent to move your on-premises file shares to the cloud. This way, all your existing NTFS permissions will still be retained and clients can directly access the file shares via the internet. As I mentioned earlier, this is reliant on outbound SMB connectivity being allowed by your ISP. So if working remotely, this could be an issue unless using a VPN into the office. Also, if your tenant has conditional access policies that require MFA targeted to all cloud apps, then you will need to exclude the storage account application that was created as part of enabling Entra Kerberos authentication. Failing to do this will result in errors when trying to access your file share, such as account restrictions are preventing this user from signing in. I will leave a link to the Microsoft documentation in the description below.